Now, if we would only listen to media or social media or every well-meaning message that we receive, we would think that Christmas is about one thing and everybody agrees on it. So my wife and I, every year, every Christmas, we try to find different ways of thinking and understanding what Christmas is really about. And I'd like to share to you a couple of those things that we've thought through. And I think John chapter 1, more than the other very beautiful narratives about the Christmas story, tells us what actually happened on Christmas. What Christmas is really all about and what it sought to do for us. I'll read 2 verses. John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Then verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's it. A verse and a half tells us what Christmas is about. Now, I love many things. I love science and astronomy and space exploration. And you would remember that the first man in space was Yuri Gagarin. And it was the Russians or the Soviet Union who sent him there to push forward Soviet propaganda. On his victory parade, the Russian premier at that time, Nikita Khrushchev, said, Gagarin went into space, but he did not see God there. Now, C.S. Lewis, the author who wrote Narnia and many other wonderful books, wrote a wonderful defense of Christianity in response to what the Russian premier said in an essay called The Seeing Eye. But he started with how God relates with us and how we have misunderstood that. Now, we're on the 2nd floor, and when my wife is up here in the 2nd floor and I'm down at the ground floor, she would just usually have to raise her voice and say, Love, can you bring this thing up to me here in our room? And I would do that. And this is how we think about how God relates to us. You would hear sports personalities refer to the man upstairs, thanking him and saying something like, somebody up there was looking out for us. Now, this is how we all think, and C.S. Lewis says that it's not right. How God actually relates to us is much more like William Shakespeare and how he relates with the plays that he had created. Not in the ways that people in the plays can relate to Lady Macbeth or Hamlet, but he relates to his creation in that he's like a gas that permeates every single scene, every single moment. Much like how Tolkien relates with Middle-earth. Now, jumping off from that idea, Tolkien could have, if he wanted to, relate with Frodo in a very personal way, which he didn't do. But there was one other author who did this, a contemporary author, Dorothy Sayers. She's a very brilliant woman. She's an author. She was the first woman to graduate from Oxford, a university in the UK. She wrote and authored detective novels for a living. And by her own self-admission, she didn't look too attractive. She had a big following because of her detective novel series, and she had one character that she created, Lord Peter Wimsey, and she created him he was very well-meaning, but then he didn't have too much success. He had some success, otherwise the novel wouldn't flourish, but it was very real, it was very human, and that he in her own words, he didn't get too much love. Then, on one of those installments, she had introduced another character by the name of Harriet Vane. Now, this Harriet Vane, very interestingly, is the first woman to graduate from from Oxford rather. She wrote detective novels for a living, and by her own self-admission, she wasn't too attractive. So they met, they developed a deep friendship, they fell in love, and they solved and they worked detective cases together to much success. Now, followers of Dorothy Sayers and her novel, they could not help but talk among themselves. Is there anybody else who thinks that Dorothy Sayers had essentially wrote herself into her novel? Do you see where I'm going with this? In the gospel, on Christmas, God wrote himself into our story because of his great love for us and because he has a mission to embark on to rescue us. Now this word in verse 14, he dwelt among us, literally, it's the Hebrew word that means tabernacled. Now the tabernacle, if you would remember, is God's presence in the midst of his people as he was rescuing them from slavery in Egypt. You would also remember that he told Moses, his own appointed leader of his people that he was going to rescue, that I have heard your cries and I am going to be on a mission to rescue you. This is what tabernacled means. And John, the author of this gospel account, uses that purposefully to tell us of the even greater event in human history where God tabernacles with us. Because there's one other dimension. On the one hand, God led the people through Moses in the wilderness from slavery with great might, with a mighty arm and it's a strong hand. But in this story of God coming with us, dwelling with us, there needs to be a consideration of risk. Not just risk, but cost. Now, we have heard many stories of how crimes have happened in dark alleyways in our city, and they have shouted cries for help, and people in that neighborhood surely heard it, but worrying for their life, for their safety, not wanting to be vulnerable, they heard it, but they didn't come out until it was already too late. But God tabernacling with us here in John chapter 1, it's in response to our cries. We can't do this by ourselves. We need help. Would you help us? God heard that cry, and considering that if he were to come, it is not just at risk of his life. If he were to come as Jesus, it will inevitably cost him his life. He heard his cries, and on the first Christmas morning, he came. This is what we believe Christmas truly, truly is. Many things that we enjoy with Christmas, the sights, the sounds, the tastes, and how it makes us feel. But those are things that really are shadows that flow from this substance of what God had done for us on Christmas, to go into the dark places of our world and in our lives, to call us by name, to rescue us, to make us children of God, John would continue to say. I would end with another thing that C.S. Lewis said, and I paraphrase, but I believe that it summarizes well what Christmas is all about. Please understand that in ancient history, when mankind is referred to in the masculine, because of the leadership mantle that the Lord had originally given man. But when we say man, it means men and women. So C.S. Lewis says this: the Son of God became the Son of Man, so that sons of men can become sons of God. Merry Christmas, everyone.